Hi, welcome to the first ever Rutgers Sustainability Town Hall. Super excited to be introducing this unique event, especially because it's completely student organized. My name's Michelle Wong. I'm part of the Rutgers Sustainability Coalition, and I'm a senior here at Rutgers studying supply chain management and political science.
And I am Olivia Haller. I'm a senior at SEBS studying environmental policy and sustainability, and I'm the president of Students for Environmental Awareness. Name your other AC.
We will both be your MCs for tonight. We just wanted to take this time to thank all the organizations that helped to put this event together. This event is co-hosted by the Rutgers Sustainability Coalition, Students for Environmental Awareness, and Rutgers Sunrise Movement. It's also sponsored by Rutgers Global and the Institute for Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences. And so, to begin, I thought it'd be useful to talk about why we're here. And the most significant point is that we're in the midst of a climate crisis right now, and that can be seen right here today. It's 60 degrees in the first week of February. But even if you examine the headlines right now, the Australian wildfires, over 1 billion animals have been killed, 30 people have been killed, and over 10 million acres of land have been torched in Australia. Some lesser known stories, like in Jakarta, the flooding. The capital of Indonesia, over about 500,000 people have been forcibly displaced within Jakarta. And in 2019, the country of Indonesia formally declared that they will be moving their capital from Jakarta inland because of rising sea levels. And so the significance of climate change is indisputable, and it's hitting us right now. And that's why we have to have this conversation. And so what we'd like to accomplish with this town hall is to really envision how Rutgers can begin to reduce its climate impact and really critically evaluate where we're going down, this path that we're going down. We'd also want to open up channels for communication. Oftentimes it's difficult to really engage all stakeholders in developing solutions like this. And so we have students, faculty, administrators, and local community members all here to talk and engage in this conversation. And as we go through this, and as we continue to discuss, we'd like you guys to consider, how is Rutgers doing compared to our peer institutions? And are we doing enough relevant to how significant this crisis is, and how do we want to move on in the future? And the second thing I'd want to touch on is really our concept of sustainability. There's often this misconception that sustainability is purely an environmental issue, but as the United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development illustrates, that's not the case. We have issues such as poverty, education, gender equality, and economic development, all intertwined and interdependent with sustainability, environmental sustainability. And so here we can see, through this international initiative and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, that sustainability is an inherently cross-cutting issue, and we cannot begin to tackle environmental sustainability issues without also considering social and economic impacts.
We also believe it's extremely important to recognize how far we've come and the progress that we've made. Rutgers, being New Jersey's land-grant institution, puts us in a very unique position. A land-grant university is a university that's given land and subsidies by its state, which makes it a public university. And as a public university, we have the duty to give back to the people who live on this land and the surrounding community. In addition to this, Rutgers is one of the most diverse universities in the Big Ten among the nation. And it's reflective of New Jersey, as New Jersey is one of the most diverse states in the nation. Rutgers also is a leading research university in the world. We are a leader in climate science and sustainability research, and this research has created an immense interest from the students. Students and faculty have been coming together several times in the past few years in New Brunswick, Newark, and Camden for sustainability symposia. And these were hackathon sessions to brainstorm sustainable solutions to everyday problems that we face. Student interest in sustainability and climate change has evolved into a surge of student activism on campus. This led to the planning of the September climate strike that coincided with the global climate strike. This Politico article noted that 800 people came out to New Brunswick for climate justice in September. The climate protest planned by Rutgers students produced 4 demands for the university. First one, to create an Office of Sustainability by 2020. The second one was to ethically divest in the university's endowment by 2024. The third one is to create a climate action plan immediately for the university. And the fourth one is to become a net zero carbon emission university by 2030. The latter 2 demands are being worked on by the President's Climate Task Force that was created by following the climate strike in September.
And so, although we have a lot to be proud of as a university, being leaders in diversity, being a leading research institution, and having students who are so active and engaged, we should still remain critical in order to really engage and continually improve as a university. And so we've projected these different universities, all 14 in the Big Ten, to really help everyone sort of gauge where we're at. And so in this following figure, we tried to highlight 3 pieces of really compelling information. And so the first being the existence of an Office of Sustainability. Currently, 10 out of the 14 schools in the Big Ten have a physical Office of Sustainability, and 13 of them have designated full-time personnel that basically run the affairs of an Office of Sustainability without a physical location. Rutgers is the only school that does not have any such mechanism. The second is the ASHE STARS rating. ASHE stands for the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And their STARS program basically aggregates a bunch of different information such as grounds, operations, emissions, education, investment, et cetera, and designates different sustainability scores for different universities. Currently, there are 13 of the 14 Big Ten schools with ratings, 7 gold ratings and 4 silver ratings. Currently, Rutgers is not enrolled in this program. And lastly, a formal commitment to carbon neutrality. Currently, there are 5 out of the 14 Big Ten schools which have made formal commitments to carbon neutrality, and more than 5 have already created climate action plans. Currently, we have the President's Climate Task Force, which is on its way to create a climate action plan, and it's really at the beginning. And we don't really have a formal commitment right now. And so these 3 pieces of information really help to illustrate how we are lagging behind in terms of sustainability. And it's really important to pay attention to this moving forward.
All right, so although the university does not yet have any official commitments to or policies for sustainability or carbon zero emissions or zero carbon emissions, the students have been working really hard to fill in these gaps. The Rutgers Compost Club, founded in 2016, is dedicated to creating community through composting. Since the spring of 2019, members have volunteered their time to host weekly food scrap collections where students, local businesses, and community members are able to drop off their food scraps to be composted. Their food scraps are then transported to the compost bins built by the club, and resulting compost is used by the Cook Organic Gardeners. Last year, the club diverted 1,365 pounds of food waste by hosting these weekly collections. The Compost Club recognizes that this system is not sustainable for an institution as large as Rutgers, but they refuse to stop until Rutgers has a legitimate food waste recovery program. Another student organization to highlight is the club Students for Environmental and Energy Development. They are in the process of completing a waste audit to see how much waste Rutgers produces. Usually this is done by the university, but SEED has stepped up to do the work.
And so we've given you a little summary about how we are doing as a university in terms of sustainability. We have many things that we should be proud of, but we also have things that we should really improve on. And so moving forward, what are some things we can keep in mind? We chose this 3-little statement, but a very loaded statement, said by President Obama at the 250th commencement address at Rutgers. America converges here. Again, this is a very loaded statement. and that we can be very proud to represent the values and diversity that our nation represents. But at the same time, that assigns responsibility to us, that we have a responsibility to our students, our nation, and the world to reach our potential as a university of the future. And so as we have this conversation, please consider, how can we be more proactive? How can we catch up with other universities? And how do we make the necessary changes to account for sustainability and the local communities that we exist in? At this time, we'd like to invite the panelists to come up and sit in these seats. And in the meantime, I'll give you guys a look on our overview of the agenda. So we just finished up opening remarks. We'll then introduce our panelists, have a moderated Q&A session, and then we'll open up the floor to audience Q&A, and we'll wrap up with closing remarks after that. Thank you.
All right, so our first panelist on my right, your left, is Michael Kornitis. Michael Kornitis serves as the Director of Sustainability and Energy within university facilities and is also a research associate at the Rutgers Center for Green Buildings. His primary work is in improving energy efficiency on campus and decreasing the environmental impacts of university operations, along with the purchasing of utilities for the universities. For their university. He's also the co-chair of the Sustainability Committee, a collection of faculty and staff that work in sustainability on campus, and has served as an advisor for a number of student-led research projects studying energy and environmental impacts on campus. Our next speaker is Tony Calcado. Tony Calcado is the university's Executive Vice President in Strategic Planning and Operations and Chief Operating Officer. Calcado's span of authority encompasses oversight of the capital construction program, leading institutional planning and strategic endeavors, and serving as the Chief Operating Officer for managing a $450 million operating budget inclusive of auxiliary, retail, facilities, transportation, capital planning, and construction, safety and emergency services system-wide. Additionally, he is responsible for public safety, crisis and emergency management, housing operations, parking, transportation, facility operations, and design and construction. Our next panelist is Robert Kopp. Dr. Kopp is a climate scientist who serves at Rutgers as the director of the Rutgers Institute of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences, and as a professor in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences. Professor Kopp's research focuses on understanding uncertainty in past and future climate change, with emphases on sea level change and on the interactions between physical climate change and the economy. Professor Kopp is a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's forthcoming sixth assessment report and of the U.S. Global Change Research Program's 2017 Fourth National Climate Assessment. At Rutgers, he currently co-chairs the President's Task Force on Carbon Neutrality and Climate Resilience. The task force is developing a comprehensive climate action plan for Rutgers that will identify pathways to achieving carbon neutrality, ways to reduce the university's vulnerability to climate impacts, and approaches to leveraging the State University of New Jersey to catalyze climate action throughout New Jersey. Our next panelist is Jack Molinar. Jack Molinar is the Senior Director of the Department of Transportation Services at Rutgers University. With over 32 years of experience as a transportation planner, he's responsible for overseeing the university bus system as well as traffic management and parking on campus. Additionally, he also works on programs for managing pedestrian and bicycle traffic on campus. Our next panelist is John V. Varani. John V. is a senior at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, double majoring in mathematics and computer science in the School of Arts and Sciences. This academic year, she has the pleasure of serving as the student body president of the university's undergraduate class. Through her work as president of the Rutgers University Student Assembly, she has championed increasing student advocacy in administrative initiatives and sustainability. She's been a strong supporter of establishing a Rutgers Office of Sustainability, and she enjoys learning more from her student body president counterparts in the Big Ten about what other universities are doing to become more sustainable in hopes of bringing ideas back to Rutgers. Our final panelist is Krishna Katur. Krishna Katur is a senior undergraduate student at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, double majoring in electrical engineering and physics. He is the co-founder and current president of the Rutgers Sustainability Coalition, a group of representatives from student organizations across campus working towards the UN SDGs. Over the past 2 years, he has been advocating for the creation of the Rutgers Office of Sustainability and for the university to take a firmer stance in its commitment to sustainability. Additionally, through the coalition, he has been working to increase awareness of the UN SDGs by bridging the gap between student organizations. He hopes to increase collaboration and communication between different parts of the student body, and in doing so, to build a culture of sustainability and inclusivity on campus.
And so a brief overview of the structure of this moderated session. We'll first ask a general question that we'd like every panelist to answer. Then we'll have individual questions for each panelist, and then we'll wrap up with another general question. We'd like to ask the panelists to keep your responses to approximately 2 minutes. We'll give you a 30-second warning. And so the first general question we have is, are there currently any sustainable initiatives that you're working on? If so, what are they? Mr. Cornelius, could you start?
Within facilities, we're always continually looking for ways to do things more sustainable. We've built 2 lead buildings, lead goal buildings, the new chemistry building, new Weeks Hall. We're always striving to make sure that we're building sustainably. We're doing various things within, recycling, looking at recycling and what we're able to accomplish better with that. We've been doing various things with our green cleaning through project management. We're doing various energy conservation projects that we're looking at, auditing the buildings, replacing lighting and other things within the buildings themselves to bring them up to be more sustainable.
Or you can just go down the line.
So let me first start by saying thank you for having us here this evening. I'm pretty sure that just about everybody that's on this panel is probably more of an expert on sustainability than I am. So I'm going to speak a little bit from the higher level, given what my position is, so I have a little bit of a different perspective. But I think there's a need for a little bit of history. So in the early days, 15, 18 years ago, the division I worked in at the time, which was facilities and now institutional planning and operations, really started what was the movement at the university for boots on the ground. What are we actually doing physically at the university? And it was what today we would call the simple stuff, right? It was recycling, it was low mowing, it was all of the low-hanging fruit. The university's evolved, we've evolved with it. I do not disagree with you. There's a lot more we can and should be doing, and I think we're working towards making that happen. I know that there's a commitment at the university at the highest levels. There are a number of associations we belong to. There are a number of groups we belong to. There are an enormous number now of academic programs that address sustainability and work with sustainability and sustainable programs, internships that have been created. And I think now culminating with, or maybe beginning with, depending on your point of view, the president's climate task force on climate change and resiliency. Did I get that right?
Carbon neutrality.
Carbon neutrality. Thank you, Bob. Again, while there is a lot still to be done, there is a little bit of history and context around this. And I will tell you that it's through efforts of people like you that continue to make this happen, but it's not for a lack of recognition that we are in a crisis and things have to happen. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Kopp now.
Great. And I'm going to try to split my time between 2 things. So I'm going to talk about the Carbon Task Force second because it's already been introduced several times, and talk a little bit first about what we're doing in the Rutgers Institute of Earth Oceans and Atmospheric Sciences, where we have about 130 faculty working across, I believe, 9 schools at Rutgers to both understand how the Earth operates and how we use that understanding to live more sustainably and resiliently upon this planet. And so, first I would say there's a huge amount of research going on at Rutgers. This is an area that's one of the top research areas at the university, and many opportunities for students to get involved in there. We're also working on graduate education. So we've been innovating in what's called transdisciplinary education, where we take people from disciplines like urban planning, environmental science, ecology, engineering, and train them to work with one another around real-world challenges having to do with primarily coastal resilience and coastal sustainability, and then they go out and actually work with coastal communities on those issues. That's a really important model that leverages our tradition as a land-grant university, which isn't just having gotten a land-grant from the federal government to fund it. It's really a mission. The land-grant universities were founded during the Civil War to bring agricultural science, it's really the environmental science of its days, through education and through research to the broader communities. And that's really a mission I think we need to double down on in the current age with the multitude of environmental challenges we face, starting with the global climate and ecological crises. Towards that end, I also serve as co-chair of the President's Task Force on Carbon Neutrality and Climate Resilience. And we just moved out of a pre-planning phase into a planning phase, so we issued a report a couple weeks ago that lays out how we're going to operate over the next 18 months, assuming we meet a couple of milestones. So we're working right now to try to start thinking across several different sectors at Rutgers, so energy, food, transportation, supply chain and waste management, climate preparedness, sixth one, how we leverage what we're doing at Rutgers to catalyze climate positive economic development more broadly, how we green our finance and budgeting system. So we're starting up projects in each of these areas where, but we have a milestone at the end of April to deliver an interim report to President Barchi so he can confirm that we're proceeding on track and give us the okay to proceed through the end of our process, which we're aiming at June 2021 under President Holloway. And as you may have seen up on the board before this started, we're organizing a series of town halls as one of our first community engagement events, and we hope you all participate.
Okay, how you doing? I'm Jack Molinar, and I'm in charge of everything transportation here in New Brunswick. So just to give you my background is I'm started off as an urban studies and city planner where I hate single occupancy vehicles. Yet I have to deal with 30,000 parking stalls. So I'm sort of a weird person to have in charge of this, but that's why my goal is to stop people from driving in between the campuses here. As you can see, most of the policies we have here is to try to stop that. And most of the complaints we get back is, but I want to do that. So it is always the push and pull of that. And we've been doing that for years. And where we became so successful at it is that's when our buses became so packed. And which is, most universities don't have that problem. They're just trying to get people on buses. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to get people off the buses and into other modes of mobility. And that's where we go to the micromobility. And that's where we're looking to soon to be rolling out with a vendor some e-scooters and e-bikes. And we think that will truly change the transportation here. Now, granted, yes, they are battery operated, so it's not as green as walking and just a regular bicycle, but it will get people towards something, and it will reduce the crowding on our buses. It will help us use less fuel in our buses. So that's a big thing that we're thinking will truly change how people move around this campus. And the other thing, we've had to work a lot on our buses with just very detailed stuff of
30 seconds.
Contract rates. So what we're going to do is we are still looking at how we can get electric buses to phase them in and phase out the diesel buses. So that is also has been on our agenda and is still on our agenda.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's really exciting to represent RUSA specifically in this town hall because even in my tenure as an undergrad here, I've seen so many things change, and a lot of that came from either advocacy or direct financial investment from RUSA. How many of you guys have meal plans? Cool, go Brower. So when I was a first year, every single drink that you got at takeout was in a styrofoam cup, and every time you would go, your food would be put into a plastic bag. In 2016, 2017, RUSA invested in the Companion program, so everyone gets a metal cup that they can bring in to the dining halls that are reusable and washable. They also keep cold things cold and hot things hot, which I think is a game changer. And in this past fall, we launched the Ban the Bag initiative. So when you go to takeout now, you will get a reusable cloth bag, which is really cool. When it comes to this year specifically, this summer we started advocating for micromobility, working with DOTS to try to bring electric alternatives for transportation to get the buses a little bit less packed, but more having more students not relying on gas-powered transportation. We have also just secured a partnership with RUPA, Scarlet Day of Service, and we'll be investing a couple $1,000s in purchasing saplings and planting them across campus this spring, which is very excited. Somewhere around Arbor Day is our goal. And we are also working on continuing an initiative that we've been working on for the past several years to get more water fountains with filtered water bottle fillers in residence halls across campus so students can stop buying those stupid plastic water bottles.
Thank you so much. So as mentioned earlier, my name is Christian Couture, and my main involvement on campus has been in the Rutgers Sustainability Coalition. And so we have been working for the past 2 years to really bring together the variety and really the plethora of organizations, student organizations on campus working towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We were founded in part because we realized there were a lot of student organizations on campus that were doing incredible work, but sometimes we were doing double work. We would come to different meetings and meet with different leaders, and we'd realize, wait a minute, that event you're about to hold next week, we were planning on doing that 1 month from now. And we encountered a lot of situations where there were areas where we could have been pooling our resources, areas in which we could have been using our collective contacts and really increasing our bargaining power, both within the university and outside as advocates. And this is really the impetus for founding the Sustainability Coalition. And right now, what we are working towards is trying to bridge all of those gaps between our student organizations and really making it easy for students to get involved within sustainability on campus. We just had a very small representation in the previous hour of the various organizations on campus that are doing incredible work in an incredible variety of areas and with incredible expertise as well. And we want to continue growing that expertise on campus, and we also want to make it easy for students to access those organizations, join them, and find ways to get involved. And really, kind of branching off that as a coalition, our immediate goal right now has been doing a lot of research with regards to our peer institutions and with regards to where Rutgers stands and where we are heading as a university. And to that effect, we have been planning events like these and really trying to increase the communication between the student body and the faculty and administration. So, thank you.
Okay, so now we will be beginning our personalized questions. So first question for Michael Cornitas. What are the greatest challenges to facilities, and where do you see the future of energy consumption within facilities?
So the challenge right now for us is to go through it and audit all of the buildings throughout the university and put together projects where we'll go through and reduce the amount of energy in the university. What we're trying to do is follow, if you guys are familiar with New Jersey's Energy Master Plan, we're going to be following along with that because they're looking to do, by 2030, have 50% decarbonization of the electrification, 100% by 2050. So we're working along with that, with their plan. And if you look at the different ways to do it, the first thing we need to do is actually reduce the amount of energy that we're utilizing. We just upgraded, we're in the process of upgrading 2 of our cogeneration plants. When they're done, they'll have a 50% reduction in emissions that they have right now, along with a great amount of water reduction, about 8 million gallons of water that we'll be reducing utilizing the cogeneration plants. Along with that, then we'll start looking at, once we reduce the amount of energy that the university is using, look at ways to bring in renewable energy. So those are the first few steps that we're going to take, and those are the challenges. The main challenge right now is going to be trying to reduce the amount of energy that we're utilizing throughout the university.
Thank you.
Our next question is for Tony Calcato. Rutgers is lagging behind our Big Ten peers in sustainability, climate adaptation, and resilience. Why has this not been as much of a priority for our university?
So I don't believe that it has not been as much a priority for our university. I think that we have to look at the entire big picture as we move forward. So again, earlier I had talked a little bit about what were some of the strategies that were put into place taking advantage of what were small goals at the time as the university grew. The university is an entirely different place than it was 20 years ago, or I will tell you, than it was 7 years ago. This is an entirely new and different university. We didn't even belong to the Big Ten until a few years ago. So is there some catch up to do? Potentially, absolutely there is. Nobody shirks that responsibility. We will continue to move and march forward and try and use best practices that our peers do, but our peers are new peers to us in many ways as well. So we continue to work and work towards the same goals that everyone else has.
Next question is for Bob Kopp. So how will you facilitate community participation in the task force? And as the task force develops the climate action plan for the next 18 months or so, what other sustainability initiatives should Rutgers take on in the meantime?
Sure. So those are great questions, and that's really key to the process. So we're looking for community engagement at a number of levels. So first of all, I guess I should talk about the way we're going to be structured. So we have an overarching task force. It's composed of faculty, staff, and we're working on getting student representations from all 4 chancellor units. So it's important also just to say, recognize, this is not the Rutgers New Brunswick Climate Task Force, this is Rutgers Climate Task Force. And so we have to be cognizant that we have all 4 units. Under the task force, we have, as I sort of alluded to, working groups set up to look at each of those sectoral areas. And those working groups, which we're still working on the membership of, Mike is co-chairing the energy task working group, for instance. We're aiming to have about 1/3 of each of those be students, and we'd like to have students on the main task force, the primary responsibility basically being helping recruit those. That said, and we are working on a very tight time frame, right? We have to have our interim report by the end of April. So there's not a lot of time for elaborate processes to get that started. But getting students onto the working groups is one thing. 2, we have the town halls, which will happen, the first set will be early in the process. We'll have more in the fall when we're closer to a draft report. And those are opportunities for feedback. We have website. We've probably gotten about 100, 120 emails so far with ideas that we're still hiring the administrative director for the task force, but as we staff up, we'll start going through. And I think we also want to look at things like, are there ways through social media or whatever to better engage the student community? We're very welcome to ideas there. And I forgot the second half of your question, but I think I'm out of time anyways.
Yeah, it's okay, maybe later. All right, and so for Mr. Molinar, as we all may know, the Rutgers bus system can produce some strong feelings within the student body. What systems do you have in place for addressing student concerns with transportation, and what are some current or new initiatives to incentivize alternative and more sustainable modes of transportation?
I think I covered that in the first thing, but it's always frustrating. A lot of the things that we've done in the past to help with crowding of buses, not just the buses. We've been working with the scheduling side of the university to see they have actually upgraded their software to try to make it so students don't have to move around as much and use technology so you can stay on one campus and even see into another building. And a lot of it is the buses can only do so much, and the reason why it's, so we started to look at what was causing the demand, which is having large lecture halls all meeting all at the same time on the same day, and no one wanted to meet at other times. So there is a tipping point of how much the bus system can do, and that's why we started to look at the scheduling. So you look at a lot of different things. We then are looking at trying to get electric buses. Electric buses is not going to solve the demand, is not going to make your trip any better. You'll just be using a different fuel. So that's why we were looking at trying to, as you can see, there's more bike lanes. We're always working with the city and the county. You have to realize all the roads here are city, county, and state. It's not all, most of it, especially in New Brunswick, is not Rutgers roads.
30 seconds.
So we're always looking at, and our planning unit is working with them. So there's long-range master plans that help with better pedestrian mobility, and all those things will help out, especially with all the micromobility that's coming on and coming closer, will help us reduce the amount of travel and make it less on the buses and less on smaller types of transportation modes.
All right, so our next question is for John V. So recently, the Association of Big Ten students took a stand for climate action and unanimously voted to freeze investments in the fossil fuel industry. The resolution states that Big Ten student body presidents will hereby advocate their respective institutions commit to ceasing all further investments in fossil fuel industry and call on their leadership for their respective institutions to commit to research and action towards future divestment from the fossil fuel industry. How will you, as the student body president at Rutgers, implement this charge, and how will you ensure that your successor will continue your work?
Yeah, so I was really excited by that bill when it was brought up at our last conference at Indiana Bloomington. And what excites me the most about this is that this is not a new idea. Students marched for it in September. Student activists have been talking about this for years, and it's not an idea that most things that come out of student government are not things that come from student government. It is uplifting the voice of students across campus to bring about change on an administrative level, because we have the good fortune of being in a lot of these rooms. So when the student body presidents came together to decide to unanimously sign this letter, it was all about uplifting the already existing movements that are at our campuses, things that this town hall is a perfect example of, and giving students the power behind the legitimacy of our names and our titles. So when it comes to implementing, it's not something that I can do by myself. It's not something student government can do by itself. It's about coming together as a unit and saying that students, undergraduate students at Rutgers, New Brunswick, stand for this. And fortunately, it's picked up a lot of press. It's gone viral on Twitter. It's been picked up by news sources, which is fantastic. But at the end of the day, that's not because of me, that's because of you. And when it comes to working on advocating and implementing, it's essentially just talking to administrators and being able to be the voice when you all might not necessarily be in the room.
And how will you ensure that this will be continued after you graduate?
So I think that really is not something that I can answer, because I don't know who's going to take my place. But what I can say is the legitimacy behind ABTS specifically, when all the student body presidents stand by something, it usually carries forward for the next years.
This question's for Krishna. What has the process of trying to get an Office of Sustainability established? And what are some challenges you've experienced, and what are some of the benefits of having an office?
Well, I'll start with the last question, actually, which kind of ties back to the earlier point I had made, which is that one of the key issues that the Sustainability Coalition has been trying to address here at Rutgers is the lack of centrality when it comes to work in sustainability, especially among student organizations, but I think more broadly as well. Even today, there are still scenarios where we find very late into the planning process for even events like these, that there are other institutes or other organizations on campus that would have been happy to participate or would really want to throw their support behind it, but then we just did not know about them or about what resources they had available for us until later on in the process. And really, one of the big things that we've been trying to do with the Office of, one of the big things an Office of Sustainability could help with, and that does help with at other institutions, is organizing this information. It is just that institutional knowledge and being able to direct students, staff, and faculty towards areas where they'd be able to better find resources and help them and really uplift everyone within the university who's working towards sustainability. As for the process of trying to get one established, the coalition has been doing a lot of research among other universities and trying to collect a series of, as mentioned earlier, best practices for establishing Office of Sustainability, and we've written some proposals in the past that have been elevated to upper administration, and right now it's really just a dialogue that we've been having specifically at the Chancellor Unit, and only recently with the creation of the task force have we seen that the discussion's been elevated a bit more about the creation of an Office of Sustainability, and specifically about trying to get some dedicated staff members within the university whose jobs they would be to organize and ultimately implement and act upon the recommendations of the task force and of other organizations on campus, because really that's what it's all about. There's a need, the coalition has realized there's a need for the university to have dedicated members whose jobs it is to really ensure that as a university we're acting in a sustainable fashion and executing upon all of the phenomenal research and activism that is being produced here.
Thank you.
And we'll be having our last general question, and then we'll be moving on to audience Q&A. So, for all of our panelists, given that the university just announced the selection of its first Black president, what efforts are you making to take diversity and inclusion into account with your respective scope of work? How are we going to ensure that the proper communities are being represented?
I'm going to hand this off to Tony Calcato.
So let me start by saying we're very happy that Dr. Holloway was recruited and hired successfully. I think his credentials are second to none. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity at the university, of course, given who we are, and I really look forward to working with him, I will say that. So when we look at diversity and inclusion as part of our strategic plan, I should say diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we look at those three pillars, that has been a theme within our strategic plan since 2014. And every one of the campus unit strategic plans also incorporates that as a strong theme, a fundamental theme. What we do, even in our central units, we've worked through summits called Courageous Leadership Summits. Part of our leadership development program has a module that where diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded. This is probably one of the most important topics facing not just the university, but society in general, of course. And we are committed to really tackling it head on. I will also tell you that just recently the President Barchi has signed a CEO commitment. It's the largest commitment. There's over 800 signatories to that. There are a couple of different pieces that we pledge to. One is better education surrounding cultural bias. One is informing and bringing our board up to speed and getting them in on the plan, working towards the overall plan for
30 seconds.
all pieces. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Great. So I'm going to split my answer again. So wearing my hat as director of the Institute of Earth, Oceans, and Atmospheric Sciences, I think one of the shames of the geosciences, environmental science, climate science is that it is not a diverse field. So gender balance is okay, but it's very, there's not a lot of minority representation. And that's, we're somewhat better at Rutgers because we have a more diverse student body and that's reflected in the field, but it's not good enough. And so we are aiming to make diversity and inclusion within the Earth System Science community. It's a priority in our strategic plan that we developed a couple years ago, and we're putting effort into moving forward with that and trying to bring in a broader community as we move our institute into its second 5 years. Within the task force, I think the element I want to focus on is what I think is going to be the most innovative aspect of our climate action plan, which is this idea of thinking about how the university in its actions is not just looking inward. We're not just trying to put our own house in order, but we're trying to leverage our role as a state university to catalyze climate positive, equitable economic development throughout the state. And there are huge environmental justice issues in the state, and I think we can help with that. You see some of that work already going on with some of the work my co-chair Kevin Lyons is doing with economic development in Newark, out of Rutgers Newark, and I think that's going back to our land grant mission, a really critical role for the university to play. So we need to both address equity issues. We need to ensure that climate action is a tool for broader prosperity. And I think the university can play a very important role in helping with that.
Thank you.
I guess from a transportation standpoint, I would go through some of the technology that we're pushing, and I've seen some of the research on, is that typical bike shares before was all e-bikes or e-scooters, was not being used widely in a lot of communities. And they're finding the new research shows that e-scooters and e-bikes are being used more widely in most communities, and it kind of tracks the exact representation of that community. So I think I'm very glad that technology is allowing us to open that up, because some of what we were doing with looking at this new initiative is we were working with New Brunswick and Highland Park to make sure that what we're bringing out, it will be used both, not just for Rutgers, but for Highland Park and New Brunswick, so then that will help the overall community. So that's one of the things that we would do that meet into that.
Yeah, look at me. I care about diversity. I think Rutgers has done a fantastic job when it comes to diversity. We are the most diverse institution in the Big Ten, which is great, but I'm gonna be real, we have a long way to go. When you look at the ethnic diversity breakdown of just the state of New Jersey, our enrollment and retention of African American students, abysmal. Latinx students, going down. Women and non-binary student leaders, not as great as it needs to be. And diversity is sustainability. No, it will not make us greener. No, it will not help our carbon emission. But at the end of the day, if you want to have a powerful, united, and representative student advocacy voice at this university, we need to be empowering minority leaders to be in these rooms and to be representing people. I've been president for a semester now, and the number of times that I'm the only woman of color, person of color, women, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that we as students need to come together with whatever we have to empower people of different backgrounds, because only then will we get a representative understanding of what students are looking for at this university.
And actually, kind of going back to your point that investing in diversity, and specifically women's empowerment, won't make the world greener. Actually, Michelle had recently referred me to a study which showed that, I forget, I'll have to go back and look for it. But essentially, every dollar invested in women's education is actually the equivalent of $4 invested in solar energy. And so investing in women's education and diversity actually does make the world greener. But more than that, going back to the earlier point about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I think that in no other way is it clearer that the issues of sustainability and issues of climate change are inherently interdisciplinary. And when it comes to engaging our stakeholders, it's not just engaging our stakeholders around the issue of climate change and the climate crisis, but it's also asking these broader questions about economic development and about social equities and diversity. And it's really ensuring that everyone from every aspect and and in any way who touches this problem is represented at the table. And that's what we've been working at towards in the coalition. We've been reaching out to organizations that are not just traditional environmental stewardship organizations, but we've been trying to reach out to organizations that work in water and sanitation and hunger, and who also work in business and innovation and in technology. And we want to bring them all to the table, because ultimately the problems that we're facing require interdisciplinary solutions. They require perspectives that can only be found when we ensure that that the members of the table accurately represent all of the stakeholders. And really at this level, the stakeholders are everyone. The stakeholders is the entire state, the entire nation, the entire globe. It's the entire student body. And that's why we were working so hard to bridge those gaps between student organizations and to ensure that everyone is being heard and everyone brings their unique perspective to the table. So thank you.
Could I just, oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt the applause there. I just wanted to let everyone know that Rutgers University, as far as the UN goals, is a member of the U.S. Sustainability Development Solution Network, which is, the Sustainability Solution Network is the UN's overall for the world, and the U.S. has just started a version of it, and it's all colleges and universities within the United States. So we're working towards and aspiring to the UN goals and the inclusion of the goals within what we're doing at the university.
Thank you.
Also, thank you, Krishna, for that. It's a Brookings Institution report.
Okay, so I believe now we're moving into audience Q&A. So open your brains. What are your questions? And we'll have a mic going around that Michelle will be, right? Yeah. Do we have an audience mic? Yeah, I think we do, right? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you have any questions on your mind, just raise your hand and Michelle will give you a mic. Ooh, we see them coming up. Yeah?
Wait, just say when you do that, it's sort of like we're in a interrogation room. So.
Okay, and also, we will be taking 3 questions at once, and then we'll have you guys respond.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So if the panelists could just reintroduce themselves again. Yeah.
I'm Mike Cornutis, Director for Sustainability and Energy for Rutgers.
And I'm Tony Calcado.
Bob Kopp.
Jack Molinar.
John V.
Krishna.
Thank you. All right, first question up. Oh, can you state your name, year, things like that?
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm a senior. This question is for Mr. Molinar. In terms of e-scooters and e-bikes, there have been studies that show in cities that e-scooters actually cause a lot more accidents, and they're often left on the ground, which causes accessibility issues, and also just the entire concept of bikes and scooters not being accessible to everyone. Also, New Brunswick doesn't have a very comprehensive bike lane system, and where it does, the traffic is often very heavy, which makes it dangerous to bike. My question really is, why hasn't Rutgers invested in a light rail system? And I know the question everyone so far has given me is that it's very expensive, but apparently we had $32 million to give a contract to Shiano, so why not a rail system?
Another question?
Hello, thank you for being here tonight, for answering our concerns and sharing your perspective. My name is Mega Soni. I'm a former Rutgers SEP student and currently working at CHINJ. My question is about how our waste is handled. And as a research-heavy university, what steps can Rutgers take to reduce our laboratory and medical waste, which has a relatively larger carbon footprint than our other sorts of waste? So I wanted to know what you think.
And one more.
Hi, my name is Javier Perez. I'm a second-year student majoring in biomedical engineering. My question is for Jack Molinar as well. I was curious about, you kept alluding and going to every question back into the e-scooters and bikes. And I was wondering, other than trying to incentivize students to make the right decisions, shouldn't the administration be trying to make changes themselves in order to, since themselves have the majority of the, I guess, cost and the reason why we're in the middle of a climate crisis at the moment, rather than just incentivizing students to make that change themselves? And so do you not think that more should be done rather than just scooters and e-bikes and more, and instead of actually investing in maybe electric buses or, as she alluded to, a light rail or anything that would actually make a significant change, I would say? Thank you.
Snaps. Okay, Jack, you can start.
Okay, since I've had two of the three, I'll start.
Yeah.
I'll start with Leah about e-scooters and e-bikes. I did look into some of the research. A lot of the accidents that happen with e-scooters happened right in the beginning when they first started using it. Portland just recently did a good analysis of it. They had a good system, and they researched it. It was an academic paper, and they said usually when they first started using it, usually just falling over, and then after it kind of drops off, not literally, but figuratively drops off, so the accidents are not real high on that, so it does get better. Also, if you look at Portland as an example, bike lanes and bike systems and pedestrian safety, they're all organic and work hand in hand. So as you add more bicycles and e-scooters and everything, you then create more of a network. That's what basically happens in any city you look at. You can't just not push something and wait for a whole system to be built before you then put bike lanes, before you put e-scooters and everything out there. It works organically, happens in parallel. So you can't just wait for it to happen, because then if you don't have them out there, then no one that builds these, like the city and the county, will build the bike lanes. So it sort of has to work parallel. So you have to work on the avenues that you can work on and then keep pushing for one while you push for the other. No, it's not sacrificing anyone's lives. It's really, there's accidents every day from cars, and everyone's always working on that safety as well. So you can't look at one accident as bad when there's thousands of people killed by cars every day as well. So we should eliminate cars, which, I don't like cars, but you work on these parallel. So that's the other thing that you do, a light rail system. Hey, that's the funniest thing that I always get asked at Rutgers is, when are you going to build the monorail? And the monorail is the transportation form of the future and always will be. It's not a very vibrant, but light rail, yes, but that's a federal government dollars. Right now, federal government is not giving dollars for transit to anyone. We can't get money for a rail tunnel. So that's why light rail. So the best way to get to a light rail at Rutgers is really to start with bus rapid transit, which is, we are halfway there. We have everything except dedicated bus lanes. And that would make, and a lot of cities actually just use bus rapid transit. A lot of cities in Latin America are just bus rapid transit. And that's really what Rutgers would get to eventually, is because we only have an eight month demand. We don't have a 12-month demand. So it's really hard to get even federal dollars for that, and especially for a light rail. So that's sort of the reasons for that. On the other question is, yes, how to make employees drive here less. I think, is that?
It was about making significant changes to the system itself rather than incentivizing students to make those changes.
Well, it's really to make the significant change to the system would be completely change how we schedule classes and how we move around. That would be one thing. I think another thing, within 20 years, there's going to be a lot less cars, so there'll be a lot less parking lots, which will change things automatically. We're not going to have as much parking lots built because they're not going to need it. So a lot of things are going to happen, and if you look at transportation throughout history, how it changes is new technology, a new mode comes in, and there's then a big change. And I've done some of that research, and you can see that. So you can't always force a change unless the economics are there for it. So just like people keep driving because it's so cheap to drive. In Europe, it's a lot more expensive to drive, and it's more expensive to own a car. So a lot less people own multiple cars there. They use more mass transit, they bike more, they walk more, because it's economically correct to do it, or because they can't afford to. So there's only so many things you can do without having those other externalities helping you to get people to make the right choices.
I have a question. Why does a monorail only use federal dollars?
No, all mass transit is hard to build, and there is state dollars, but you need federal dollars to actually make it work. It's just like the highway system was 90% federal dollars at the time when it was built. Most transit systems are used with federal dollars, but DC is not really open to transit right now. Like, they don't really fund Amtrak that well.
If I want to add in on the light rail question, so hey, we will have a working group on transportation in the task force, but we have to look at this seriously. We have fixed budgetary constraints. If you look at Rutgers, New Brunswick, the direct on-campus emissions and the emissions from the grid are about 200,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year. 2% of that comes from the bus system. 98% of that comes from electricity or heating, right? So if you have $200 million to spend on reducing our carbon emissions, if you could spend $200 million on a light rail, or you could spend it to rework the heating infrastructure of the university and to implement decarbonized electricity, if your goal is to reduce carbon emissions, you're not going to spend it on building a light rail. So we have to look at the trade-offs with real numbers underneath them.
There was another question, right?
The question on the medical waste.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So waste in general, within procurement, we have a person that's in charge now of working with the vendors and with manufacturers of anything that the university is buying, purchasing, so that there'll be a way to eliminate the amount of waste that we have once we utilize whatever that is, and maybe return it to the manufacturer, return it to the vendor, and to be reused. We do that with like the carpeting right now. Any carpeting that we put in is recycled. So at the end of its useful life, it gets taken up and goes back to the manufacturer, and we get new carpeting. And that's what we plan to do with other pieces as we move along here. And we've been working, like I said, through procurement, we've been working with various vendors to start implementing that change.
Okay, so 3 more questions, right, Michelle?
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Elliot. I'm a current junior here at SEBS. I live off campus, like immediately off campus, as do a significant amount of students here at Rutgers. It's no surprise it's obvious that in order for things to be sustainable, the facilities we use should also be sustainable in terms of resource usage. Given the amount of impact Rutgers has on its immediate area, is there any game plan or any form of initiative for Rutgers to help improve the things that has an immediate impact on the areas immediately surrounding Rutgers. Yeah.
Hello, Xiangyue Wang, Senior, Rutgers Senator. I have a question for Dr. Cobb. So you mentioned earlier that the President's Task Force is also working on strategies to not only make Rutgers more sustainable, but the community around Rutgers, which also known that Rutgers is sometimes called a Rutgers bubble, no matter in New Brunswick, Newark, or Camden, meaning that Rutgers as a community is to some extent more privileged and at a different environment than the city around us. And so would you mind elaborating on in what ways would you try to help those cities, those bigger communities around Rutgers to be more sustainable in an equitable way?
And one more.
Hi, my name is Nina. I'm a senior in the School of Arts and Sciences. So this question could be directed towards Mr. Molnar as well as Mr. Cobb, because you bring up your involvement with the Transportation Task Force. So other universities have shuttles to transport students to shopping areas with supermarkets, but unfortunately New Brunswick is a food swamp, meaning it's very difficult for residents and students to get immediate access to nutritious and sustainable food. Is there a plan to create consistent shuttles to supermarket areas so students have access to healthy foods?
You guys can answer now.
Well, I guess I'll start with the first question about reaching out to the, the community. As far as what we're doing as far as sustainability, energy auditing, and what have you, there are programs that are out there, and we actually work with the sustainability coordinator in New Brunswick, in conversations up in Newark. Haven't had much conversation down in Camden, but we plan to be able to start helping them with their sustainability efforts within the various communities around the university.
And even here in New Brunswick, there are a series of programs that we work with the city on, and we're always looking to partner with the city. So we have a move-out program, for instance, where we pick up all the trash that are left behind by everybody that moves out in May at the end of the year. There are a few other programs that look like that, and our goal is to continue to move those programs forward. There's a lot less, and for those of us that have been here for a few years, a lot less barriers within the city now when it comes to town-gown relationships. And that's really here, it's in Camden, and in Newark as well.
Yeah, I would just say it's, we're still in an early stage of an 18-month process. We're going to have our town halls with the internal Rutgers community first, but once we process what we get from there and get started, it's certainly our intention to have similar engagement with leadership in New Brunswick, Piscataway, Highland Park, Newark, Camden, as well as with people in Trenton in the state government, because I think that's an important part of what we're doing. On the shuttles, I'm going to let Jack talk about that, because again, we are at an early part that there's a transportation task force. It hasn't, we haven't started getting more than starting to hear ideas yet. But Jack thinks about this all the time.
There's always been requests for having shuttle our bus system, not just, right now our bus system is set up to go to campus and to get you to class. That is the main goal of it, is to get from campus to campus, not necessarily to get off campus. And when I started looking at when I first got here, there was a student government that wanted my department to run a free bus to the Willowbrook Mall and back. And they said, well, we're willing to pay even $1 a ride. And I was able to educate student government at that time and other people that New Jersey Transit has a bus that does that now, and it goes from the New Jersey train station right to the Willowbrook Mall. So there are lots of New Jersey Transit options right here in New Brunswick that can get you to many places because a lot of people live in this community that use that all the time. And New Jersey Transit buses are not that expensive, and that's really what we should be doing as a community is encourage people to use what's there because a lot of those buses are running empty, unlike the Rutgers campus buses. So I would encourage you to look at that and to use the options that are available because they're there.
Did that answer all the questions, that group of 3 questions? Okay, so we're moving on to the next 3.
Hi, my name's Bridget. I'm a junior at SEBS. So there have been many efforts to reduce food waste on campus, but for a university of our size, there hasn't been any sort of sweeping, comprehensive plan to address food waste and organics recycling. And I wanted to know why that was. And more directed at Dr. Kopp about the task force, what kind of organics recycling programs are being considered in the climate action plan, if any have been considered yet. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alexa. I'm a junior and a student at SEBS. This is another question related to transportation, and I understand the relationship and the partnership with federal and state dollars relating to public transportation. As a commuter and someone who does use the public bus and train, how are we going to be expanding accessibility for commuters or for students who are driving, for example, or taking the bus, starting with pushing for student discounts for the train and bus system, although the bus is affordable, but then expanding onto more bus routes and times. This is like a societal topic, but however, a push from a large community such as Rutgers University could help to propel that.
One more question.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Shug, and I'm a freshman in the School of Engineering. So I'm with the organization Students for Environmental and Energy Development, and recently we've been researching and trying to promote this website, Ecosia. If you haven't heard of it, it uses its revenue from ads to plant trees. So given that this search engine has millions of users, I was wondering if any of you have heard of it or have any plans to possibly implement it into Rutgers systems or anything of the sort. Thank you.
Okay, starting with the food waste question.
Sorry. I was just saying, Mike might have something substantive to say. I'm just going to say, love to hear the ideas, but again, we issued our pre-planning report about 2 weeks ago. You saw that, laying out the plan for the next 18 months. You're going to get very unsatisfactory answers at the moment, and you're asked what we're considering because we're still in the setting up phase. Our goal is over the next 3 months to take a look and do sort of a preliminary inventory, get a report out to what our peers are doing and what we're going to quantitatively look at. But we're still spending up. If you look at most of the schools that have done this is a 2-year process. We're doing it a little faster, but it'll take time.
No, I just wanted the first question about the food. We're talking about within the dining halls where we're utilizing the food there and how, we're actually extracting the water from the food, and then it goes off to farmers to be able to utilize with their for feed and also for crop fertilization. And there are starting to look at, we utilize the waste oil. We actually have a system where it makes heat and also electricity within the dining halls at this time.
One thing that I can also say is RUSA in the fall, looked into the idea of advocating for compost bins in all the dining halls, similar to how Indiana University Bloomington has. Every single dining hall there has a compost bin, and it also is decorated with instructions on what can and cannot be composted. And from what I've heard, that's very successful. On the flip side of things, Iowa University actually, their student government started a program where all of the residence halls had compost bins that they actually like paid for and distributed, and then collected the compost at the end. And one of the things that happened was a lot of students were very uneducated about what could be and couldn't be composted. So almost every single time they collected their compost, it was a bad batch, and they had to throw everything out, which created as much waste as not having the program at all. So RUSA decided that this was something that needed to be advocated on the administrative level rather than building a program from the ground up. So I do agree that compost is like a really important thing that we could be doing to combat food waste, other than just also like only putting as much food as we can eat on our plates, but that's more of a cultural thing. But yeah, like that, if that helps provide any insight on what other Big Ten schools are doing, there are goods and bads.
So Rutgers for years had a program with New Jersey Transit that New Jersey Transit does this, and we verify someone's a full-time student. You can get a 25% discount off of a monthly pass for either bus or rail. And unlike other states, many states have transit systems that have lots of capacity. New Jersey Transit doesn't have that, and they also don't have funds. So they're not, that's kind of where we are with that. And so right now we have that program, it exists, and that's where we are. If we look at more than that, I guess the new task force will look at it. But right now, a 25% off of a monthly pass is a very good deal if you're using it every day. If you're not using it every day, there is no discount.
Okay, and then the final question about Ecosia, the website, search engine.
The final question, I didn't.
The final question was if any of the panelists have heard of the search engine Ecosia, where they use their ad revenue to fund tree planting. Yeah, and if you, no.
To be honest, I'm not familiar with it. I can bring it back to our IT people.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add one thing to that. I cannot speak for the administration here, but among student organizations, because this was brought forth by SEED, when we encounter opportunities like this or Ecosia, browsers like Ecosia, I do think that it's important for us as well to spread this information, and I think I'd be more than happy to take it back to the Sustainability Coalition. I'm sure John would be more than happy to take it back to RUSA as well. But as a collective student body, I think we have the ability to advocate amongst ourselves and to also spread this information, ensure that when opportunities like this arise or when programs like these or potential applications like these are available, that we can also spread the word ourselves and ensure that students are taking advantage of this. So thank you.
All right, 3 more questions.
Hi, my name is Micah. I'm a senior in the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences. I have a question for Janvi and for Krishna. So I was wondering, I know the Sustainability Coalition is kind of working on this, and I'm sure the student body is as well. But if there could be some way of kind of just having a conglomerate of people who are interested in volunteering in various different opportunities, but kind of aren't really sure how to purpose themselves, if somehow we could kind of bring those people together and then they could be directed towards, say, organizations on campus or specific events where they might be used, I think it could be a great way to kind of have people who don't know how to get involved but know that they want to be involved, to kind of channel them into places. I really liked what you guys were talking about in terms of making sure we're not overlapping on our resources, and so I was wondering if you had anything on that. Could I just quickly ask as well where students and faculty and community members could access the information on the percentages for Rutgers energy consumption and emissions, and the 2% versus 98%, that stuff?
Yeah, so that's in our pre-planning report.
Okay.
And hopefully we will also have a system set up relatively soon where it'll be periodically updated. For a while, back when we had an EPA that was interested in such things, Rutgers had an MOU with EPA and annually reported emissions. We haven't been keeping that up to date with, but Mike can speak to that.
So the University Sustainability Committee has a website, and there was a lot of information about the energy we use, about what we do with dining, different things that faculty are doing here. And I'd recommend that you Google the University Sustainability Committee website. And there's a lot of information there. And also on our IPNO website, we have information that goes down to sustainability and how much energy we're utilizing right now at the university.
Okay, and 2 more questions, because that was a quick one.
So, Mr. Cornelius, you referenced the major priority on like efficiency in buildings and improving that. So the question is more directed to, I guess, Mr. Cornelius and Calcado about future projects as far as new buildings, what kind of efficiency standards they're being held to. I think there is some sort of commitment for new buildings, but more importantly, if there's commitments for retrofitting old buildings to improve their efficiency with heating and electricity usage.
So any new building or major renovation has to meet 90.1 2013, which is the ASHRAE's energy code, and it's also the energy code for the state. We require an energy model for every new building and every major renovation that we do, and it has to meet at least 15% or better energy reduction than a standard building that would be built. As far as going through and doing upgrading all of the buildings, as far as energy, we plan to go through and start doing energy audits of buildings. There's funding through the NJ Clean Energy Program that we're going to utilize to do that. Right now, I'm putting together a package that we're looking at the smaller buildings on College Avenue through a program called Direct Install, where we'll have a contractor come out to look at the lighting, look at the heating systems, make recommendations for upgrades, show the payback for that, and we'll pick and choose what would work best for us. And we plan to do that with, throughout the university as we go along.
All of the buildings are also designed to LEED Silver. That's the minimum design standard. We actually have LEED Gold buildings on campus. All buildings, yes, all new buildings, and that's for a number of years now. So all of them are designed minimally to LEED Silver. All of them exceed in their design LEED Silver, but that is the minimum standard. We have a few gold now as well on campus, and I can tell you tonight that if the stars align, soon we may be announcing our first net zero building as well.
Okay, and 1 more question. Sorry for the round of 3.
Hi, my name is Dulce Almonte. I'm a senior at SEBS. My major is environmental policy and I'm minoring in sustainability. So from my understanding, sustainability is a balance between the economic system, the environment, and also reaching social equity. So Michael, Cornita, I'm actually very disappointed at your blatant disregard for the question of social justice and social reform being brought to Rutgers University and you just passing it over to Tony. So Tony, as the head or chief of operations, I know you work with planning. So to my understanding, in 2030, here in the Student Center, there's supposed to be a combination of the 4 separate cultural centers, which I think is a blatant erasure of the different cultures. So the Center for Latino Arts and Culture, the Paul Robeson Building, the Social Justice Education Center, and the Asian American Center. You also mentioned how diverse Rutgers is when Rutgers has been a predominantly white institution at both New Brunswick and Camden. Also, since all of the heads of the department, I suppose, the different departments that we're speaking with, you are all white. I haven't had a single black professor here at the university, so I just want to know how exactly that we're going to bring social reform to Rutgers.
So your question it's an excellent question and well-timed. And I don't think anyone is running from the fact, or I'll tell you what, I'm not going to run from the fact that we have a lot of work to do in this space. There is no doubt about that. I think our colleagues here probably were the best spokespeople a little while ago on the question of diversity, equality, and inclusion when it came to articulating exactly what the issues are and the problems. When you wind up being the only woman the only woman in many of the meetings that you ever go to, and the pressures that come along with having to conform in order to be, or to make your point, it's just not acceptable in 2020. We have a lot of work to do. I don't have all the answers, but I know and I recognize that we have a problem and that we need to find solutions to that problem. We need to listen. We need to be inclusive. Actually, we need to start with inclusion, and we need to make a firm commitment across the university that that's where we're going. And I truly believe in that, and I think that we are making strides, not fast enough. The strides aren't long enough, and there's a lot of work that still needs to happen. And I, for one, am committed to helping that happen, to moving that along, using my position in making that happen. So I'll leave you with that on that topic. I don't have specific answers I can give you, or we can talk about it. Hold on, I'm sorry. So I have to tell you, that's, I'm not sure that that's still in the plan. So the thing with planning, and remember this, 2030 was built 2014, 2015, when we started doing it. It wasn't built, or it wasn't developed in a vacuum. There was input, there was student input, there were faculty input, there was administrator input. We're planners, and I head up a planning department, or I have a planning department, but the reality is that's a very collaborative movement, right? It's not done, we just don't sit in the back room and say, here, this is what this is going to look like. The beauty of plans is that they're iterative, and they change, and the needs of today aren't necessarily the needs of yesterday. So I would advocate that needs to be revisited, although I know it is in the plan of revisiting, that needs to be revisited. I would advocate that we need to be more culturally sensitive to make sure that we make the right decisions as we move forward. So it's not for or against, it's making sure that we get the right input, the right collaboration, and all the right spokespeople at the table so that we make the right decisions.
Okay, and the first question was about, towards Krishna and John V, about volunteering, if there was like a hub for if you want to get involved. Right, Micah? Something like that, yeah.
So I think Krishna would be a much better person to answer this question. How RUSA essentially works is we advocate for all student needs, and we have committees that are centered on doing so. We have academic affairs, health and wellness, and so on and so forth. And university affairs is actually the committee that handles all things transportation, dining, recreation, and sustainability. So when it comes to working on bringing students together on this specific topic, this year actually we started having a representative from RUSA go to the Sustainability Coalition meetings, and we defer to them as the leaders and organizers, and we're more than willing to participate whenever we can and provide whatever support that we can. So I feel like Krishna would probably be a better person.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, I think really the question of how to get students involved and to direct them towards the organizations that need them is kind of $1 million question. And so, throughout the university, go to anyone's student involvement and they'll keep talking about it. But that's really one of the big goals for the coalition. There are so many students with so many varied interests, and we want to try and make these resources as easily available, as easily accessible to all of those students. So actually one of the projects the coalition is currently working on that we hope to complete by the end of this semester is a network map, a more functional network map of all the different organizations, at least the student organizations on campus that are doing work in sustainability. And so if you come to the coalition, for example, we might be able to better direct you towards organizations that would suit your interests. But overall, I'd say when it comes to getting involved on campus, and this goes more broadly speaking, I'm sure John V will agree with me when I say this, it's really about just taking that impetus and trying to show up to one of these meetings, be it a RUSA meeting or to a Sustainability Coalition meeting, and just interacting with some of the leadership you see there. I think this goes for all the students who are interested in getting more involved or want to deal with any of the issues that we're talking about here today. We are always looking for people to get involved, and we need more students who are interested, who are passionate about these issues. And so If you are ever concerned or don't know who to go to, there are some links that we will be sharing with all of the members here later after this meeting, and some that we're floating up above during the tabling sessions. But please come talk to us and go to your student leaders, go to your campus representatives, go to your school representatives, the ones that sit either on RUSA or the other school governing boards, because that's really our job as student leaders, is we want to connect you to those resources.
Yeah, what's cool is that a lot of us know each other. Like, presidents of all of these clubs, like, we hang out. So if you come to RUSA and you're like, hey, I'm very passionate about sustainability, I'll be like, hey, there's this dude named Krishna Gotor that you need to go to. Like, here's his email address, and vice versa. So I think the first step is just going out and talking to someone, and then we will find a place for you here.
All right, 3 more questions.
Hello, my name is Ezekiel. I'm a senior in SAS and Blaustein. The question is in continuation to Dulce's question, actually. I believe a part of her question was not answered, but the question that I have is that environmental justice was mentioned previously. I'm not sure by who or when. It was in the beginning. And I'm sure that this concept is important. It means that we should be embracing innovative and alternative input from communities of color, particularly Black and Latinx communities, as they are most affected by pollution, climate change. They will be in the future. This is something that's going to happen around the world. So with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion that you've mentioned before, Tony, my question is, how many of the task force members or members of your boards are people of color, the people that are making decisions? That's my first question. And the second question I have are, what are your plans, I guess this is for everyone, what are your plans to recruit a diverse member or body of communities of color? We're working in Camden, North New Brunswick. These cities are predominantly people of color. But in this room, we see that there's a lack of diversity. So we keep mentioning diversity here, but there isn't diversity in this space that's so important. So I guess those are my 2 questions. And also, you keep mentioning that we have a Black president, which is great. We also had a Black president in 2008 and 2012, and we were still dealing with issues of racial injustice.
Hi, I forgot which one of you mentioned it specifically, but you mentioned that you are in the process of building your first net zero carbon emissions building. Where is it and when is it expected?
Hi, I'm James. I'm a senior in SAS. Since we're at an event focused on sustainability both at Rutgers and globally, and we all agree that equity is central to sustainability, how important is it for Rutgers to consider sustainability in a global context? If we are retrofitting buildings using construction machinery from Caterpillar, while Caterpillar bulldozers are simultaneously tearing down Palestinian homes, then can we really call ourselves sustainable? If we agree that fossil fuels divestment is important, then should we also focus on divesting from the largest polluter in the world, namely the military? And if we agree that equity is important to sustainability, why are we investing in the prison industrial complex, an industry that has devoured the social wealth of Black and Latinx communities? Essentially what I'm asking is, do you all collectively agree that fossil fuel divestment is enough? And if so, why?
We can start with that one. I didn't write that down, it was too long.
I'm going to take a stab at the first one. Let me try and remember your questions kind of in order, I think. Or if not, you just...
It was more about environmental justice and like
Yes.
regarding to the task force and how many people of color are in the task force and how many people of color are going to be involved with that, right? Something like that.
So you also asked about the board as well, right? I believe. Right. So there's 15 members of the Board of Governors, and I'm working off the Board of Governors, which is the governing board of the university as a whole. I'm working off the top of my head. I think there are 3 or 4 people of color. There are, I want to say about 5 or 6 women as well. There are minorities, so it's a pretty representative board across you don't think so? No, I'm saying of all the different we're looking at Latino, we're looking at people of color, we're looking at women. So there's a pretty big representation on the Board of Governors itself. We can agree to disagree. So I can't speak to the task force. I don't know. And I'm not sure that, I don't know.
I would say of the faculty members on the task force, I would say probably roughly half are women. There are a substantial number who are minorities, including my co-chair, Kevin Lyons. We just expanded the task force to include a bunch of staff, and I don't know what our demographics are now because the staff who are brought in are the people who are in the roles with the oversights of the various parts of the functions of the university. And we haven't had our first task force meeting, though, and I don't know all of them, and they're in the roles that they're in. So I think it's important. I think I think honestly more important than whether the facility staff who are on the task force are diverse is whether we are proactively engaging the broader communities, both on campus and more broadly. Because if we have a diverse facility staff who join us, but we just talk to ourselves, I think that's less successful than if we go out and make sure we're engaging with the diverse New Brunswick, Newark, Camden communities in which we're sitting.
Okay, and the second question was the net zero building.
So we'll have an announcement coming out soon on the net zero building. I'm not prepared to do that tonight, but you will be hearing something soon. I will tell you this, it will be on the Bush campus. It should be within the next 2 months. Certainly before the end of the semester.
Does anyone want to take a stab at James' question about inclusivity and divestment?
Yeah.
So James, was it? The university has policies on divesting of different components of our endowment or whatever it is we're investing in. My suggestion is that is the vehicle to take. I think trying to put people on a spot whether they believe, don't believe is not the vehicle to take because there is a pretty good policy and it's not something that will not be taken seriously. The university has a policy, right, and a procedure that you can follow in order to get the answers that you want and in order to take it to the next step, if that's what you feel.
Okay, so I have personal opinions, but since I'm here as a task force member, I'm just going to expand on that. So there's a joint investment committee of the Board of Governors and Board of Trustees, which is in charge of managing the investments. They adopted a divestment policy a couple of years ago, which says something along the lines of the university endowment shouldn't be invested in things that are against the university's values. So the angle of action I would take is to try to get established that those things you care about are not in the university's values. I think if we have an official goal of getting to net zero carbon, it may change the way that committee looks at questions of investing in fossil fuels. But I think that is the right group of people to talk to. I don't have anything to do with the endowment, but that joint committee is the place to look.
Okay, 3 more questions. We have probably time for just one more round of 3 more questions.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a senior studying EPIB and SEBS. So like the presentation before mentioned, Rutgers hasn't been doing nearly enough on climate and sustainability. We haven't had a climate action plan. There's been inconsistent emissions tracking. we don't have an Office of Sustainability and no commitment to carbon neutrality. So we're lagging behind other universities, and we're not doing enough given the severity of climate change. But this inaction isn't for a lack of resources. Rutgers has $615 million in unrestricted reserves, and we just signed an 8-year, $32 million deal for a football coach, including in his contract a private jet. So my question is, will Rutgers allocate the proper resources and funding to the Climate Task Force and to other climate initiatives to be a carbon zero institution by 2030?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a senior in civil environmental engineering. I know you two talked a lot about like the energy consumption in the buildings, but I was just wondering if you guys were working at all in like the water industry, stormwater management. I know that the Weeks building has a rain garden and a green roof for that, but I was working a lot about that in my project, senior design project, and I was just wondering if you guys were working on that at all.
One more question?
So, hi, I'm Xenia Morin, and I'm a faculty member here, and I want to thank all the students for your questions. This is a question for the students on the panel. Recently, the core academics extended to diversity inclusion, so we now have a requirement around diversity inclusion. So academically, we're making progress on that side. Do we need a sustainability requirement in our core education? Do you feel that undergraduate students here at Rutgers understand what sustainability is, and should we do more in our academics?
Okay, so the first question was Emily's question about proper funding of the task force and how we have $615 million in unrestricted reserves to be carbon neutral by 2030.
So on the resources for the task force, let me say that I have a couple of the people that we report to or work with closely, Tony and Brian Ballantine in the president's office here. And Barbara Lee, who's Vice President for Academic Affairs. Everybody we've worked with has been very supportive. We have not, we're in the process of staffing, of developing the staff we need. We haven't run into any financial barriers. So for the task force planning process, I think, so far we've been extremely supportive, and I'm hoping that support will carry over with the presidential transition. I don't have any reason to think it won't. But of course, you're not really interested in, do we have adequate resources to develop a plan? The question is, do we have are there adequate resources going to be behind the plan? And I think a couple of thoughts there. So one, I think it's really important that the student body continues to be engaged. It's always important in these things that just because a task force is established doesn't mean you stop putting pressure for things to happen. We can talk about sort of the U.S. political scene and when sort of failure of advocacy groups to continue advocating once they sort of got something in motion led to failures of things like climate legislation. But it's important to keep up the pressure. In terms of specific targets, we are not starting the task force activity with a specific date in mind. What we're trying to do is see what's feasible given a variety of constraints. I can say I am sure it will be sooner than 2050 because it's easier to decarbonize Rutgers than it is to decarbonize New York State, or presumably New Jersey will adopt the same ambitious target as New York State at some point soon. But we have to think about what a target means, right? So if you look at University of California, which has a 2025 target, you look at their projections, their emissions are going on about 50% decline from when they started to 2025, and then their projections are that they'll drop off. Why? Because they're going to go and buy a bunch of offsets in 2025 to cover what they haven't managed to deal with on campus. And we will look at offsets, but I'm not sure a target that relies heavily on buying offsets from somewhere else in the world is necessarily a trade-off I'd make. The other thing to think about is what's covered in a target. There's the direct emissions we have control over. what's called Scope 1 emissions, so those are things produced by transportation and fuel consumption directly on campus, and Scope 2, which are electricity consumption. And I could see us coming up with a feasible plan that would get us those down to pretty close to net zero in a 10 to 15-year time scheme. But then there's everything else, right? So commuting emissions are harder to analyze, but they're a significant chunk of our activities. And supply chain emissions are another one. Those, I would argue, should be within scope. When we get to net zero, we need to have tackled our commuting emissions. We need to have tackled our supply chain emissions. But those are also much harder to deal with. And so I would say we may need some more specificity than just a number to think about what we want to do. But we want to do the analysis first and have an ambitious and feasible target that follows from that.
Yeah, the next question was regarding stormwater management.
So stormwater management, yes, we continue to do stormwater management. We continue to look to be able to filtrate the water before it reaches any rivers or streams. You know, as we did with Livingston campus, as we look at the 2030 plan, it's built in there to continue that effort, that we want to be able to filter water out before it meets the river or meets a waterway, and that it'll be clean. So we're working on that. We're also working out ways to reduce the amount of energy we're using at the amount of water, I should say, that we're using at the university, and ways that we're able to reclaim the water as we do various processes, which we've been working on, little by little, to take care of that, to reduce the amount of water usage that we use.
Okay, and the last question was for Krishna and Janvi about sustainability requirement, or if you feel that that's necessary.
Well, I think the easy answer, yes. We definitely need, I think, all right, let me put it this way rather. As a public university and as the land-grant University of New Jersey, I think we have a responsibility really as a large research institution as well that has contributed so much to climate science. So we have a responsibility to ensure that all the students that pass through this school are sustainably conscious, and that can take various meanings, and obviously in the world of academia, there's a lot to unpack when we talk about these problems of sustainability. But I think it's important for all the students that come through this school to be conscious of the issues that we're currently facing, the problems that we as a society are facing, and I also do think that we should be training ourselves as students to be forward-thinking, to be sustainably minded when we go out and graduate and enter the workforce or whatnot. This is, I think, it definitely is a responsibility for us as an institution, and I do highly support the idea of having some form of sustainability-minded curricula for our students to go through.
Yeah, I would say yes with an asterisk. And the reason for that is I think it's really difficult to swallow this fact at a university, but academic competency is not the same thing as experiential competency. And I think the diversity and inclusion core requirement is an exemplary example of that. Every student here can take a course on diversity and inclusion, but if you are a transgender student at Rutgers University does not feel like they have a space here, they do not feel like they have a voice here, or they do not feel like they can rise as a leader here, it doesn't matter that we're all in these classes and we're all trying to find the easy A core class that we can take, or we're taking the class that interests us. And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, I think, yes, having everyone take a course on it is definitely a step in the right direction, but it isn't a Band-Aid that can gloss over all of the other problems. It's a problem that needs to be tackled from all the way from enrollment to retention to identity-specific spaces like the cultural centers and keeping them intact. And I think with sustainability, it's the same thing. It is taking a course on it, but it's also having bins in the dining hall that explain exactly what you can and cannot compost. It's having recycling bins that are more well-placed across the university with specific signs on what you can and cannot recycle. I didn't know that you had to wash out recyclables before you put them in the bin. I learned that like 6 months ago, and that's terrible because I've been putting so many things in the recycling bin. So it's about, yes, it's about learning things in the classroom, but it's also about creating a university culture that integrates those lessons into applying them in the real world.
Nice. Okay, so we will be moving into our closing remarks. Yeah, so tonight was pretty good, I think. I wanted to thank everyone for participating in the first of many town halls. It's really crucial for students, faculty, and staff to work together with the administration in order to complete our goals for a more sustainable Rutgers and a more equitable Rutgers. We have so much potential as a state university to help transform New Jersey into a more resilient and sustainable place to live. I think what we really learned tonight, and what I hope the panelists have really heard, was that as much as we care about and want to prioritize sustainability and diversity and inclusion go hand in hand. And I think from all the questions that we've had, I think it's really important for the administration to hear that fully and truly. Yeah, and as we move on and we start planning new things and planning more plans for Rutgers, I think it's really important to hear that in our minds, that diversity and inclusion is really important. So we've discussed many important topics tonight, and it's important to work with the momentum that we've created. So I want to speak to the students. Get involved with an organization that you align with, even though many of the students in this room are already very involved, but can always get more involved. And never settle for something as is if you really believe that it can be improved, and always question things. Reach out to your professors and TAs and tell them about the work that you're doing. They can most likely give you invaluable advice and possible redirection. And to the faculty and staff, hear out your students and work with them. Use your lessons as a tool to teach your students to create real sustainable solutions that can solve the problems that we face every day. And to the administration, hear out the students and faculty and truly feel their concern. Recognize the potential that Rutgers has in creating a more sustainable university and the ripple effect it could have on the rest of the state. With our existing partnerships and collaborations and President-elect Holloway, we have the power to make a profound impact on the future of our university as well as our planet. We're in the midst of a global climate movement that has made the need for change at this institution indisputable. We must work together to fight for the equitable futures that we all deserve. Thank you.